So here we go. Let us start the 3D concepts one by one. Let us start by understanding the different methods of sampling. Okay, we'll go?
Yes.
Right. Terrific. So let's go forward one slide. Almost all primary research involves drawing a sample of elements is a technical term, but for all practical purposes in commercial market research, we're talking about people. So almost all primary market research involves drawing a sample of people from the population. And on the basis of information that we collect from the sample, by asking them questions in a questionnaire or something like that, we make inferences about the population. That is, we form conclusions about the population. Right? So almost all market research involves a sample survey. So we have to understand how to select that sample. Now, I will pause here for a second and ask you, can you take a wild guess why we say almost all and not all? Okay, I'll tell you. See, the point is that certain kinds of research like employee satisfaction studies, when a company does an employee satisfaction study inside its own company, how satisfied the company's employees are, those things don't involve a sample survey. They involve a census survey, meaning every single employee is invited to participate. So that's the reason I'm saying almost all. But almost all is still 99.9%. So for all practical purposes, it is every single survey involves some kind of sampling. Right? Okay. Yes. You have a question?
When you say population, you mean the people in India?
We're jumping the gun. So the very next slide we'll talk about this. So population is defined as a totality of cases. Again, cases is a technical term from a textbook. For all practical purposes, we mean people, right? You don't do market research with you don't go and ask an animal what it thinks about the pet food. You don't go and ask a table what it thinks about the room layout. For us, it is people. So population is defined as a totality of people corresponding to the target group definition, and that is the answer to your question.
Okay.
So, for example, if a particular brand of toilet soap is aimed at women who are in the age group of 16 to 25, who are in social, this SEC stands for socio-economic class. Okay, who belong to socio-economic class A homes, then the population is a total number of such women in whichever geography we are targeting. So if your target group is only Chennai, then it is the number of ladies of age 16 to 25 SEC A homes in Chennai.
Okay.
If your target group is India, it is India. If your target group is South Asia, which is India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka, right, Nepal, then it is the number of people in that particular geography. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
So the population, another term for the population is the universe. These are important terms to remember in the market research context. There should be no doubt or confusion about what these terms mean. Right? Okay. Let's go forward. The second term which you absolutely must be familiar with is sampling frame. So the sampling frame, loosely speaking, the sampling frame is the list from which they can draw the sample. So the list can be telephone directory, the list can be the electoral rolls, the list can be yellow pages. Okay. I'll give you some more examples to explain this concept. Let us say we need to do a study among companies that shops that offer Xerox services. Okay, in let us say Bombay, for example, Mumbai, that is your population. Now, how do you draw the sample? You can go to different areas and walk around. But if you really want to control the proper sampling method, you should ideally have a list of all such Xerox shops. You should have, you should have an address which says door number 23, first floor, so and so commercial complex, SV Road, Goregaon West, Mumbai 400062. You need something like that. If you have a comprehensive such list, then from that list you can take a sample. That list would be called sampling frame. So, where there is no such sampling frame, sampling necessarily becomes less accurate and less efficient. Where there is a list, it becomes easier. Okay. Now, what are the lists which, if you're doing a list, it's a study among people, then there are voters lists in every city, every village in our country. So we can do a study amongst them. If you do a study among people who have a landline telephone at home, then there used to be something called a telephone directory, which is a list of all names and phone numbers. Your generation may not be aware of it, but there was a time, if you want to find out the number of Mr. Ramachandran who lives in Ashok in Chennai, you can go to the telephone directory, search for RAM, and there will be some 150 names with RAM, and you search out the phone number, you can call the person, and there's a good chance that you will get the right, very good chance that you will get the right person. Today, those things are outdated because everybody has a mobile number, but there is no telephone directory of mobile numbers. Right? So, these are called sampling frames. It's a very important concept to remember. Okay. Thirdly, a person who participates in a survey is called a respondent. Once the person comes to the survey, you don't say, I spoke to so many customers. No, you say, I spoke to so many respondents. It's the same thing, but it's important to use the right word in the right context. Right? Are these three terms clear? Universe, sampling frame, respondent.
Right. I have a doubt. Will this sampling frame applicable to qualitative interviews?
It applies to anything. But when it comes to qualitative research, there's a different method of sampling. But the concept of sampling frame applies to everything.
What is SECA?
Socio-economic class. Okay. So you can divide people based on the purchasing power, which is income. Or you can divide people based on their purchasing power plus some kind of education parameter. So a socioeconomic class A would be people who are well educated, well employed, and therefore probably have more purchasing power compared to say somebody who is SECE, who is not well educated, not well employed, and therefore the purchasing power will be low.
How would we know who is SECA?
So there are specific questions that we ask about the family members, the level of education, level of occupation, and based on that we classify them. Right. So we will talk about this when we talk about certain common concepts in the Indian market research industry. Right. So something like a dictionary we will be doing a little bit down the line. Maybe we'll do that when we come to the applications. Okay. So no, can we go back one slide? So one slide down. The blank slide, yes, thank you. So when we talk about sampling methods, so there is sampling, and within this there are basically two broad kinds of sampling methods. There is something called probability, there is something called non-probability. Okay, probability sampling, non-probability sampling. Within non-probability, there is something called convenience sampling. There is something called judgment sampling. There is quota sampling. There is ABC sampling, and there is snowball. And within probability sampling, there is simple random, there is systematic, there is stratified, and there is cluster. While it is important for you to know all these different kinds of sampling, it is particularly important for you to know systematic sampling and cluster sampling and convenience sampling and snowballing sampling. They're all important, but these are used relatively more often in the Indian industry. Okay. One important thing that I want to stress before I start talking about the methods is the meaning of the word random. Right? In English, random means just about anybody. In market search and in statistics, random is a very, very rigorous word. Okay, so for example, let us say we're doing a study among people who walk into a mall, right? And we want to interview them about which kind of shampoo do you use or something or the other. Now, if you put somebody there to stand at the door and you tell them select 100 people, after that you ask them how did you do it? They say I just randomly selected 100 people. What they're saying is English random. Whoever I felt like I just spoke to. That is not truly random in the market research sense. If however you say, out of all the people who walk in, every 10th person you contact, right? Then there is a rule behind it. Then that qualifies into one or the other kind of random sampling. In this particular example, it is systematic sampling. Right? So, the word random should be used after a lot of thought because it means you've gone through a process. It should not be randomly used, so to speak. Right? It should be used very, very consciously in the correct context after having gone through the process. Okay? Is this clear? Please never ever use the word random lightly. Right? Okay. Let's go forward. So, in case my handwriting wasn't clear, there are two broad kinds of sampling, non-probability sampling and probability sampling. The technical definition of this is that in probability sampling methods, every element, again in the market research context, every element is every person in the sampling frame. What's the sampling frame? We just talked about it.
It is a list from which the sample is drawn.
Yes, and the list is as close to the population as possible, right? So every person in the sampling frame has a calculatable chance of being selected. Meaning, you can calculate saying this person has got a 0.001 chance of being selected, that person has got a 0.002 chance of being selected. It may not be equal, but you should be able to calculate. The methods of sampling will allow you to calculate the chance of being selected. Right? This is the technical definition. But commonsensically speaking, as industry professionals, you can just understand that probability sampling is suitable for quantitative research. Non-probability sampling, technically speaking, means there is no way of calculating how likely one particular person has of being selected. You cannot calculate because the method is not scientific. Non-probability sampling essentially is not a scientific method. Therefore, you cannot calculate how one particular person has a chance of being selected. So, as I was saying, since non-probability sampling is not a scientific method of sampling, there is no method to calculate how likely this person or that person has a chance of being selected in the sample. Right? This is the technical definition again. So, technical definition of probability sampling is that you can calculate how likely any one person in the sampling frame is being selected. Technical definition of non-probability sampling is that you cannot calculate the likelihood of any one person being selected. The non-technical, common sense and perfectly good enough understanding of these two methods of sampling is that probability sampling is by and large used for quantitative research. Non-probability sampling is by and large used for qualitative research. Quantitative research is all about numbers and a lot of science involved in the numbers. Qualitative research is not so much about numbers and science, but more about feel and emotions. And that's the reason these two methods of sampling are suitable respectively. Right? Is this clear so far? Okay. Yes, so let's look at the different kinds of non-probability sampling. As we saw a couple of slides ago, there are 5 kinds of non-probability sampling: convenience, judgment, quota, ABC, and snowballing. Let's go through each of these one by one. So convenience sampling, actually the word itself describes it. It is convenient for the researcher. The researcher doesn't make much effort to draw a sample, and so it's called convenience sampling. So convenience sampling can also be described as accidental samples, which is not a term that is used very often, but it is an accepted understanding of the concept. A good example is a website will say, whoever logs in, can you fill up the survey? So they're not making any extra effort to send the survey over to the specific kinds of people. Whoever comes can fill it up. Likewise, a person who is, comparing a program on radio, for example, maybe a talk show or something, and where he says, what kind of music do people want to hear? So he invites people to call in, and they tell him, I want to listen to so-and-so song. He assumes that the person who's made the effort to call in and wants a song, he assumes that's a popular choice and he plays that song also. He's not making an effort to talk to 5,000 people and say 60% want to hear the song, so I'll play the song. No. He's just standing there and finding it convenient to let people, call in and indicate a sample. The problem with convenience sampling is that we don't know if it is representative of the population. For example, to come back to this website example, is it that the people who fill up in a website are the ones who generally have nothing much to do? And so they're going around browsing websites and they fill up a question. So let's say you want to fill up a survey among men working in banks, just for example, and you post a survey on some website which men tend to browse. Okay. So if people, come and fill up the survey, do you know the busy bank employees, they may not have time to come to the website at all. You have not taken the trouble to make sure a sample is representative. So there's a danger that, you've only got the people who have nothing else to do, who have time on their hands, and so they have come and filled up the survey. Now, I'm not saying that is what has happened. I'm saying we don't know. And I'm saying we have no means of finding out. We'll have the suspicion in our mind, but we have no means of finding out whether the suspicion is correct or wrong. Because we have not followed a scientific method of sampling. That is the point here. Nonetheless, this doesn't mean it is useless. The point about qualitative research is that it's extremely small sample studies anyway. So even if you do a perfectly random sample, the sample size is so small that you cannot have a completely representative sample. And therefore, convenience sampling works very well for qualitative research. Right? Should we go forward? Okay. Judgment sampling. See, in India we have elections every 5 years for the Lok Sabha, we have elections every 5 years for the state assemblies, municipality elections, so on and so forth. Right? So every 2 or 3 years we are voting for something or the other. Now, you would have seen opinion polls, so on and so forth. So sometimes researchers will go to the leader of a particular community and say, which way is your community likely to vote? The community could be a religion, the community could be a caste group, the community could be a linguistic group. This is an example of judgment sampling. The researcher is using the judgment that the community leader will have his finger on the pulse of what his community wants and that he can answer for them. May be correct, may not be correct. We have no means of knowing. But it is a method of sampling, it's a recognized method of sampling. It is useful in certain very specific situations. But as I said earlier, convenience sampling is used much more commonly than judgment sampling is. Judgment sampling is better used by very, very senior researchers who know that particular situation very well. better to stay away unless you're very familiar with the situation where you're going to study. Right? Can we go forward? Quota sampling. You first set quotas. I want 5 men, or there's an example here. Let's say in a school there are 6,000 boys and 4,000 girls. And we require a sample of 50 people for the qualitative study. So we will set a quota saying 6,000 to 4,000, the ratio is 30:20. So we'll take 30 boys and 20 girls. This is a quota sampling. How will you take those 30 boys? We cannot say into convenience sampling. So quota sampling is just a way of deciding, which are the sections and how many people. But within the quota, we still select with convenience sampling. Right? So convenience sampling is the relevant method of sampling even in this particular situation. Any questions so far, or shall we go forward? Yeah, let's go forward. ABC sampling. This is extremely interesting, very relevant where in B2B universe. So for example, let's say there's a manufacturing firm which is supplying, let's say, automobile components, and it's supplying to all the two-wheeler manufacturers. Okay. So in India, there are big two-wheeler manufacturers like Hero, Honda, TVS, and Bajaj. And there are several smaller two-wheeler manufacturers as well, right? Like Lamborghini, for example, so on and so forth. Or Yamaha, for example, which are not as big as these first 3 or 4 names that I mentioned. They're big, of course, but they're not as big as that first 3 or 4 names. So this components manufacturer can consciously say Bajaj and Hero are my A-class customers, and Yamaha and XYZ and XYZ are my B-class customers, and then another 8 to 10 people are my C-class customers, or another 50 to 60 people are my C-class customers, right? So then this company will say, in my survey, I want all my A-class customers represented because every one of them gives me so much business. That view is so important for me. Correct? In my B, I want at least 50% of my customer base represented because they are also important. C, not that important. We can take out of the 50 people, a sample of 10 people is good enough for me. So in this method of sampling, you first classify as A, B, C. In A, you will have a high, what we call sampling fraction. High proportion of the population we will take in our sample. In B, we will take moderate. In C, we will take a smaller proportion. So our sample here represents the importance to the business, not in number of people terms. So that is 2 versus 50 here. But in terms of business, those two maybe contribute 60% of the business. Whereas these last 50 may contribute 30% of the business. And therefore, in terms of importance of the business, you cover the most important customers. That is the concept here. Right? Any questions, any doubts? Clear about this? Can we go on to the final method of non-probability sampling? This is snowballing. So, let us say we want to do a study among girls who studied their post-graduation and who are from a small town in Tamil Nadu and who live in Chennai in a hostel. So the study objective is to find out what are the expectations that young girl professionals have from the hostel where they live. That's a study objective. So what is my target population? The target population is girls from a smaller town in Tamil Nadu who come to Chennai in search for a job, who have done their post-graduation, therefore they're professionally qualified, working in a professional environment, and they're staying in a hostel today. Ladies, working women's hostel today. Now, do I have a sampling frame of this? I just need a sample size of 20 or 30. It's a qualitative study. So what I can do is I can find one such person somehow. Somebody known to me in my office or some other office, hey, there's a young girl in my office who fits the description. So I will ask that girl, can you answer our survey? Let's say she says yes. After that, I ask her, can you give us 2 other people that you know with similar backgrounds? So she'll give us 2 names. She may not give us. She has the right to say no. But if she gives us, we'll interview those 2 people. Then each of them will ask for 2 more people. And then 2 more people. So like that, we get a complete sample. Right? So what happens is you start with one person. then one person gives us 2 people. This first of the 2 people gives us 3 people. The second of the 2 people gives only 1 person. Then this person gives us 2 people. This person gives us 4 people. This person doesn't give us anyone. This person gives us 2 people. So on and so forth, till we meet our sample requirements. Is this drawing clear? So why is it called snowballing?
The structure looks like snow.
Sort of, yeah. Can you be more specific? It's called snowballing because, let's say there's a hill and there's a ball of snow, and it's snowed. It's a snowy hill. It's not a non-snow hill. There's one ball of snow that starts falling down. As it rolls down, it will become bigger and bigger because it attracts more and more snow. That's why it's called snowballing. So as you roll along, the sample size increases. So you realize the beauty of this is that many of this, the name itself gives you the definition. And if you can relate back to the name, you can't, it's tough to forget these concepts. So snowballing is a very useful method of sampling for the difficult to find target group. So I gave one example of, young ladies from a small town in Tamil Nadu. Here we have talked about another sample, people who are in endurance sports cycling. Total in India, there may be only 30 or 40,000 such people. How do you go and search for them? When you find one, he will be part of a group of people who are into that. Right? However, there is a thing to watch out for here, which is that in this case, we started with this one person and then we found. But we should not stop with this. We should have another one starting person and take that person's contacts as well. Can you tell me why? Guess.
Sample spirit.
Yeah, more specific. Capture this. This first young lady, her friends and her friends' friends may, only may, all be similar. I'm not saying will, I'm saying may be similar. They may have similar ideas, in which case we may not be capturing the full width of viewpoints. But if you start with another person, her set of friends may, again only may, not will, may have a different set of viewpoints. Just for example, let's say this first one person works in IT industry. This other person works in the advertising industry. The timings are different. The work cultures are different. Therefore, the circle may be different. Well, let's say the first person here is a vegetarian. This person here is a non-vegetarian. The expectations from the hostel and in terms of food will be different. So the point in this, I come to this, I'll say this several times as we go along. The point in qualitative research is you want to capture as much diversity as possible. You don't want to miss out any group because the sample is to begin with small. You have to make sure that you cover, as much diversity as possible. So are you comfortable with the 5 methods of non-probability sampling? Convenience sampling, judgment sampling, quota sampling, ABG sampling, and snowball. Excellent. Can we go forward? Let us talk about